And 3, 2, 1.
Again, welcome Matthew Alford, co-writer of National Security Cinema and one of the producers, if I'm not mistaken, of Theaters of War.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Nice to see you both. And,
How you doing?
Nice to be seen by the audience as well. Hi, everyone. That's a very, very complimentary introduction. Thanks very much for saying that. I'm glad that we've been able to have that influence as a kind of loose-knit team over these years. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
No, I would say that, your body of work, I think, for lack of better terms, gets not overlooked, simply because it's too complex for people to sit down and really understand the manipulation that is media. And it takes time for people to understand that some of their favorite movies, some of the favorite shows that they watch, that has been embodied, like media has played a large role in families sitting down, and especially in America with 3Ks, individuals sitting down in front of the TV, watching, sitcoms and stuff like that, and wouldn't think that, and I'm just throwing names out there, for speculation, like the Brady Bunch, didn't have some type of DoD support or this,
that we know of.
So your body of work has been able to help not just myself, but also, like my mom was saying, like when I was talking to Roger Stahl, there's a 1955's version of Major Payne, and they remade that in the 90s, and then they're getting ready to remake another one. And so it just gets you to understand like certain aspects of it, and so that's why I appreciate your guys' body of work, and why we have even indulged into wanting to request documents ourselves for certain particular whether it be comic books or whether it be comic book movies in particular. Particularly X-Men is where like I think me and Ryan want to kind of dive into. But yeah, welcome first and foremost to the show. If you can kind of give the viewers a brief history of yourself and your body of work, and where this all started, and kind of where you're at now with National Security Cinema, and this body of work.
And that dope ass mustache.
Well, okay, so my most recent history is that I did have a shave this morning. My future history is that tomorrow, it's September now, I think I'm going to grow a beard.
I love it.
Mustaches are a very particular taste, and for a very particular time.
Right.
So this will be the last time you'll see me with a mustache until next year. My other history is from today. I've just come back, and the reason I'm been slightly rushed this afternoon is I've been at a protest for Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
So my work over the past few years has expanded, I guess, away a bit from the sort of hyper focus on the political manipulation of film and television, and I've tried to expand it away from that. I stood for Parliament a few months ago at the British general election on an anti-war platform, anti-imperialism platform, really. So that's my very recent history over the past year or so. But I began by doing a PhD in this beginning in the early 2000s. Looking at the manipulation looking really about how films, even when they seem quite critical of the United States, are often nonetheless sort of quietly, sort of subtly, actually very supportive of sort of the underlying benevolent meta narrative, the US exceptionalism, the idea that America or the West in general is a kind of good entity in the world. I started looking at those, and that was before the team started looking at the actual conscious manipulation as done by the CIA, FBI, Department of Defense, and so on. So that was early 2000s, and did a PhD. I'll try and keep this reasonably short because it's an introductory question, but I did a PhD on that, applying Noam Chomsky's work on media to Hollywood. Then I did a book about which is called The Writer with No Hands, which was also a film, sort of documentary.
I just got done watching that this morning. It was fantastic.
I'm kind of glad that you brung that up, because after watching the documentary, I didn't really think you wanted to speak too openly about that, just because of the specifics of the situation.
It's not something that I've spent a great deal of time talking about for about 10 years, but nonetheless, I did create a novel out of it. But yeah, it was quite a stressful experience, which I was glad to move on from. But nonetheless, I'm pleased with the book in particular, and the film ended up doing pretty well and was a pretty good piece of work as well. So that's where I went. That was around about 2014 to 2016. And then subsequent to that, I've been working with Tom Secker a lot. And as you know, this book, National Security Cinema, which I happen to have here only because I was going to give some away at the Gaza protest. So they just happened to be in my bag.
I would also really like to talk about that protest, if you wouldn't mind. If you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit about it, because we're kind of...
I then did, but just to bring us up to the present, I did that, and then Roger started working really intensely on particularly on the Department of Defense's role. Meanwhile, I did do a book called Union Jackboot, which is about British foreign policy, which is I don't know, it's a little bit over the top, isn't it? Like a splat of blood on the O.
I like it.
But nonetheless, that was
less is more.
Yeah. And then I can't find them right now, but they're in the bookshelf somewhere. There were various French translations and updates of national security. We've got a beautiful hardback, fully illustrated French version of National Security Cinema, which I can't see anywhere right now, and other editions as well. So that's a summary really of my work and output over the past 15 years. As for the protest, it was good. I've been doing those quite regularly over the past few months, and they often ask me to speak. One of the people that we had there today, I'm not quite sure how familiar an American audience will be with Ken Loach, who's a film director in Britain, going since the 60s. He's sort of Britain's. Do you know John Sayles in the US? Sort of left-wing filmmaker. Anyway, yes. Ken Loach is one of the most famous and revered filmmakers in Britain. He happens to live near here, and so he came today to give a talk. His work's really worth checking out. Daniel Blake, and he did a lot of films about Northern Ireland, the conflict there. He did. His first film was a very touching movie about a kid who keeps a kestrel called Kez. But he did a lot of very, very politicized films. One called Hidden Agenda, again about Northern Ireland from the early 90s. He ended up getting run out of Northern Ireland by the Unionists while he was making that film. So he's a close ally of Jeremy Corbyn's and the sort of the proper Labour left in our country. So it was really I barely met him for more than a second today, because he's very old now. He did his speech and then he left. He's been working since the 60s. And then the protest itself after the speeches was good. There was some good sort of performative ideas there. They did a die-in, like when people dance around and then sort of act out
claps.
And claps. I wasn't part of that. I was just holding a sign at the time, so I didn't have to do it.
Nice.
And
I take side duty too.
Yeah. And then one of the other things I thought was really nice, actually, in terms of just performative protest, was they had all the mums and kids were at the front of the procession going through the city with buggies. What do you call them? Strollers or whatever.
Strollers, yeah.
So they had sort of,
strollers.
you know, with dolls or real babies or whatever in the strollers. And yeah, it was quite a sort of haunting scene, particularly when you've got the image of the I'll try not to bring the mood down, but you know, basically other imagery that's
yes
pretty grim about what's happening there at present. So it was quite a sort of I don't know. I always think with protests that they need to be enjoyable because then you bring more people in. There needs to be a bit of a carnival atmosphere going on, so that there's with the sadness of it and the sort of horror of it, and being informed within it. There needs to be
there needs to be joy in the struggle, right?
There needs to be joy, there needs to be hope, and there needs to be a variety of activities. And I feel that those protests that we've got going in Bath now, and I from what I can see of the surrounding cities and what little I know of the London scene, I think that is happening. But we're all sort of learning off each other, I think. You know, all the different protesters are learning different sort of techniques and creative ideas. Whether I mean, I just, all I do really is turn up, and I think I also think that's a good piece of advice for people, really, because I think there's a hell of a lot of people who want to go, but they're not quite sure if they would fit in or what they should do when they get there. And you know,
I was thinking the Will Ferrell interview on Talladega Nights where he's like, "What do I do with my hands?"
Yeah, don't worry about that.
Right? Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Just turn up and just enjoy it for what it is, and just because the main thing is to create numbers, because that creates a visual spectacle. You're just one person of many, and then from that, maybe it will build into maybe you as a person will do more. In my case, you know, they often ask me to speak, and I enjoy doing that, and I put effort into preparing it. And I do think it is part of this broader thing of, you know, we're talking about propaganda, and you know, if these organizations, the Israel Defense Force and CIA and MI6, you know, if they were only lying to sell a tube of toothpaste, it wouldn't really matter that much. But you know, they're lying and framing. More importantly, they're framing issues to lead to extreme violence and domination. So I think it's important to get out into the real world as a sort of academic to do something there as well, if you can.
Yeah.
Did that answer all your questions, or did I answer about 8 questions at once?
It definitely answered the question. To move this conversation, to gravitate this conversation, let's talk about national security culture. You know, like you gave the brief genesis to how, you know, to present day as to, you know, how we got here. National security cinema for us, obviously, as we've stated on multiple occasions, has been one of the core, one of the pillars of decolonial parallels. And so I'd like to start the conversation off by asking you, what did not make national security cinema through the editing process? If you could briefly, maybe said movies, or even just said scripts that, you know, because you don't just go over movies that were or franchises, I should say now, because that's essentially what they become. They become mega franchises that made billions of dollars off of manipulation. But what are some scripts that, you know, were completely targeted by the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, i.e. the Pentagon, that the military wanted nothing to do with, wanted the society to have nothing to do with, that particularly did not make national security cinema? Because you go over a plethora of books, a plethora of scripts, that at the back end there's appendixes that I just enjoy. I haven't even gotten through half of, I believe there's I think what Appendix C, I think, is the last one in here. That there's just so much information, and it just blows my mind. So maybe if you could, what didn't make the editing process for you know, these paperbacks that we have in front of us?
I think that if you don't mind, I'll answer the question in a slightly different way. I think because national security cinema, as it was when we wrote it in 2017, was, I think, really comprehensive. Maybe that's an exaggeration. I mean, obviously there must have been things that we missed, but what we wanted to do was bring in case studies in detail, and then also we had a list of films that and TV shows that we knew that we wanted to reference in there, which we wouldn't necessarily go into as much detail with. For example, NCIS and that kind of those kind of TV shows, Cops and all that kind of thing. We wanted to give a really wide range of an indication of a very wide range of things going on. What I'd say about the film, Theatres of War, is that was much more narrow, and I think it probably had to be much more narrow. It was only really based around the Department of Defense Entertainment Liaison Office. If there was a thing that was missing from the film, or a kind of editorial choice, I think the most important editorial choice for the documentary Theatres of War was probably not including a wider range of agencies and influences over the militarization of cinema and TV. So, for example, now we do include these in the final chapter of National Security Cinema. We do talk about these other ones, but they were, I think, a kind of notable absence in the documentary. So take, for example, here's 3 examples. Rambo 3, American Sniper, and the George Clooney, Nicole Kidman movie, The Peacemaker.
The Peacemaker, yeah.
Yeah. All 3 of those films did not have Department of Defense ELO support. American Sniper was turned down because it was too horrible to endorse basically someone who's a psychopath assassin, or close as damn it.
No, I think you nailed it.
Rambo 3 wasn't supported because it was so violent. I think it was the most number of deaths in any film ever made up to that point. So that wasn't supported. And The Peacemaker was, I'm not quite sure why that wasn't supported. I think they probably didn't even ask. There didn't seem to be any documentation on that. However, I would say that each of those films, for different reasons, between these dates of 1988, 2007, 2014, arguably they are the most gung-ho, militarized, interventionist, sort of vile and regressive political products that Hollywood has produced. Certainly they're up there in the top bracket. Rambo was, as you may well remember, was dedicated to the heroic freedom fighters in Afghanistan, which of course within 5 minutes became Al Qaeda.
Right. Yes. Yes.
American Sniper was basically let's just kill every civilian who looks like they may have got some explosives in their pram. And The Peacemaker, although not quite as sort of overtly bloodthirsty, nonetheless shows and advocates very clearly for America to just go into Russian and other airspace whenever it wants to at any point, because it's the good guy. The United States is the peacemaker of the title, and it needs to go in there to kill bad guys because there's nuclear terrorism going on all the time, and so that excuses everything that we do. Now, it's important, I think, that those to recognize that although the Department of Defense's ELO is the key problem, if you like, or the most overt, tangible problem in Hollywood in terms of making a militarized political culture, nonetheless, there is a broader problem in Hollywood. You would still have quite a few pretty nasty films out there and pretty nasty TV series, even without this kind of conspiratorial office that exists. And of course, we had to really elide that in the documentary, because it would have just been too difficult to have got into a wider story about the sort of ideological economic and other political influences. One thing that I think I might be wrong here, but I think it might have come about through discussions between us all anyway, as producers. I think that we ended up putting in more about the CIA than was originally in the early cuts, and I think that was important because I mean, the CIA and Department of Defense are sort of two sides of the same coin when it comes to national security. I mean, you could make a case that the FBI and these police forces, the NYPD, LAPD, you could say, well, they're not really foreign policy as such. So maybe they do belong in a different category. But I certainly think that the CIA, Department of Defense need to be put into the same bracket when it comes to influencing film and TV. I mean, the CIA obviously does a lot less. They've only done a few score productions over the years, but they're very involved, and they're very involved from an early stage. So their influence over those has been really very important, and also about very important prestige projects, such as The Courier with Benedict Cumberbatch about the Cuban Missile Crisis, which completely mangles the history of the Cuban Missile Crisis and makes it look like the Soviets were about to militarily attack the United States, which of course was not true in the early 60s. And other products like Charlie Wilson's War, which I think you may have discussed with. I did watch your interview with Roger the other day, but certainly Charlie Wilson's War was a really important one and a very sensitive prestige topic, because of course it ultimately, you know, what happened in Afghanistan obviously did ultimately come back in that phrase, in that term, blowback, on September 11th 2001, and so that was an extremely important film for them to be involved with and to manipulate and to prevent there being, and they explicitly say, we were able to prevent this this link from being shown of our arming of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 80s and the consequences on 9/11. So there's all sorts of films. So I think basically it's Department of Defense and CIA extremely important with TV, but there are a range of other organizations which are incredibly important in terms of creating regressive politics on screen, and then quite beyond that, even when those organizations are not involved, simply the studios themselves, even though the studios often see themselves as sort of liberal politics, having liberal politics, they are often justifying effectively Western benevolence and therefore Western violence. I mean, I think the earliest film that I analyzed 20 odd years ago was Three Kings, for example. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a Clooney movie. I mean, it's a great film. I'm not saying that just because politically it's slightly off that it's wrong, but it opposes the idea of too heavily militarizing what's happening in Iraq, but essentially through just and it's actually very sensitive about its depiction of Iraqis to some extent, because the torturer, the villainous Iraqi torturer in that film, who tortures Mark Wahlberg, gets him to imagine, what happens if your child, your wife, was being killed in this war, and you see the imagery done of that, and it's beautifully done. But nonetheless, that character still ends up, trying to electrocute Mark Wahlberg to death. And he's still...
Don't we all want to electrocute Mark Wahlberg to death?
Well, maybe someone would now. But, and the film as a whole is still an argument for intervention, but military intervention that's done nicely. And that can be a very dubious message. In fact, I'm not sure if I think we put it in National Security Cinema in that case. I can't remember now. But George Bush, when he was just before he stood for election, met the director of that film. I think like a cocktail party or something like this in 1999, and David O. Russell, the director, said to him, "Look, I've just made a film. I've just made a film that challenges your father's legacy in Iraq. And apparently George Bush said, "Oh, well, I'll have to go and sort that out then." So in other words, David Russell was thinking that he was being really smart and anti-war, but he kind of made a narrative that said, well, we should have done this better. And George Bush was able to say, well, I will go and do that then. Thank you very much for the advice. I'll go and invade that country and do a really good job of it. It's difficult with sometimes even with these narratives. It's a similar thing happened with Hotel Rwanda, for example, which is a more ambiguous case, and some other ones, like even like Avatar, for example. That whole that franchise kind of it tries to avoid the kind of white savior sort of thing, but it also kind of plays into it. So it's sometimes the case that even with these products that are sort of trying a bit more and a bit more intelligent, perhaps, and a bit more liberal, they sometimes still play into myths, and Orientalist myths, maybe even racist myths or whatever.
Almost. We did a whole thing, and we were dreading to not want to do the
complete piss out of Avatar 2.
Yeah.
Which one?
It is Avatar 2's The Way.
Oh, yes.
The Way of Water. It is complete white saviorism, and we we have a specific term. We called it galactic settler colonialism. If you could, Ryan, I do hear someone at my door. Can you? I know.
Yeah,
you had
I do have a question. So yes, I do have a specific question that I'd like to ask based on. Okay, so you were talking about earlier. You were talking about Rambo 3 and how it didn't get DoD support, right? Because it was too violent. But if you remember, I've always wanted to ask you this because First Blood, if you recall, was like 100% like anti-war, 100% like fucking pro, like we should take care of our soldiers. PSD is a real thing. You know, he famously goes and murders a whole police state unit because, you know, they hated him for being in the war. And then the next one comes out and he becomes this reluctant hero, right? That has to go over and do like all kinds of terrible things in the name of justice, right? But like the end of First Blood was very, very much like, no, man, I just want to go chill in a cabin somewhere, and I want you to leave me alone forever, please. And so like I wonder if you had seen anything about that in your research, or because it seems a really hard turn to take.
Yeah, I think there's probably a term for this. I can't remember quite what it is, but I wrote about it a while back. I mean, I liked First Blood. You know, I like the Rambo series, and there is this kind of anti-war thread in it, and certainly a great suspicion of concentrated power systems of authority or illegitimate authority. But that's why ideology is important. That's why like a deeper set of ideas, connected ideas, are really important when it comes to storytelling. Because yes, Rambo is the goodie. Rambo doesn't want to fight. Rambo is manipulated by baddie government. All those things are like, you know, that's kind of fair. You know, that's sort of fair enough depiction. But also, because the filmmakers of that didn't really care that much about representing the political world fairly, they also were like, Vietnamese bunch of kidnapping, lying scumbags.
Right.
In the same way that something like The Deer Hunter, which you might well have seen from the late 70s, I'm sure, you know, there's an anti-war film and a brilliantly made movie with Christopher Walken and De Niro, and you know, it's a classic. But they didn't care enough to check whether or not the Vietnamese captors played Russian roulette with American soldiers. And, you know, in reality, they didn't. So they effectively have this crucial, almost sort of iconic scene in which the Vietnamese prison guards look like massive sadists.
Yes,
getting people to play.
They actually just did they just did a reenactment of it on Always Sunny in Philadelphia a couple of seasons back, and Danny DeVito does the Russian roulette. It's pretty funny. I mean, for sadist humor.
Yeah, no, sounds good. So there's an example where you know, creatively the filmmakers may have been terrific, and you know, they've probably got their heart in the right place, sort of politically, but they don't care enough to avoid basically demonizing an entire people for something that they didn't, you know, is an unfair characterization. And it's the same thing with Rambo 3. You know, at the end of the day, there's a deeper thing going on there. First of all, the easy demonization of villains, you know, as part of this kind of Orientalist mindset going back hundreds of years. And also, I guess, this kind of benevolent American thing. You know, at the end of the day, what Rambo represents, I suppose, or one of the many things he represents, is a kind of Western decency. He's reluctant to get into war, but he represents that sort of ideal that we feel that we all have about society. So it's a little bit like, I don't know, I think everyone, probably even quite kind of regressive or right-wing people, believe that that there are baddies in government, that there are kind of nasty people in government, xenophobic people in government. But if that's all you believe, if you don't really look at the system more, if you don't see the kind of ideological connection, how the ideas all connect there, then you can only ever really be like, oh yeah, your opposition to the state, your opposition to militarism will always be a little bit thin, because it's like, yeah, I'm like my anti-war is like the Rambo anti-war, which is like, yeah, I don't really want to fight, but if I do fight, I'm going to kill loads of them, and then I'm going to be a bit annoyed about my own government for sending me there. It's like, but even so, but you know what I mean? It's like with anti-war stuff, I think you kind of need to have quite a lot of joined up thinking. That's one of the reasons it's difficult to get across to people.
Isn't that kind of the limits of liberal bourgeois democracy, though? Like,
yeah,
you know, if we're being honest, like, isn't that kind of why all this stuff, like you're talking about, like all the connective tissue, they have to sell the reluctant soldier, right? Because
because that will work better, because then you get the anti-war people in, to some extent, you get the cynical people, you get the apolitical people, and you get the right-wing Reaganites in that particular instance. And so the number of films that can actually be bothered to do a kind of more thorough job of that and still make it entertaining is sort of inherently hard as well. I'm just looking at a list here that I sometimes pull out. There are a few that I sort of list as being particularly good that don't fall into those traps. Kill the Messenger, 2014. Vice, 2018. I always like that's one of the few that I really recommend quite regularly. You know, the one about Dick Cheney.
Yes.
Official Secrets, which was on TV just last week here in Britain. The Keira Knightley. What was that? The Keira Knightley one. It's all about the lying in Iraq war. That's Steven Soderbergh two-parter called Shay, which was really good, but again quite hard to get through.
Right. Well, I mean, it's 4.5 hours. You know.
Yeah.
Hey Ryan.
Oh, sorry.
Green Zone, the Nick Cage movie, Lord of War, but not many more than that. Not many more than that actually can be bothered to. Going back a little bit further, V for Vendetta, and then through a different genre. Of course, Paul Verhoeven did it very well, but only through disguising his kind of Noam Chomsky anti-war, anti-imperialism perspective in Starship Troopers, which is of course a brilliant movie. But yeah, it's quite difficult to do, and there are few and far between those kind of movies that really do that well and entertainingly. Oliver Stone obviously managed it, but yeah, he's a sort of one-off as well as a director.
Right on. Yeah. He's a one for one for sure.
Yeah.
I sent you a message, Ryan, so hopefully you got it.
I got it.
What is that? We were in the midst of us formulating how we're going to go about this discussion. We took the approach of you're our second guest, so our first guest was Roger Stahl. We felt it went well, the kind of flow that we were going, where we kind of were bouncing, questions that were from various topics. So I do hope that this conversation has been engaging for you. we would like to, if we could, go into Palestine, Gaza, particularly within the media, as me and you via email. You expressed, that there is some maybe something that that was potentially not on purpose, but just in the midst of the conversation might have gotten overlooked by Roger Stahl in regards to Israel, Palestine. So if you could kind of break that down, within media, how there's been this mass erasure of Palestinian, or this degradation of Palestinians, and this kind of uplifting of this false narrative, which in part helps fuel this narrative that Israel has a right to do what it's been doing to Palestine for 76 years. So yes.
Again, that goes back to this issue that the Department of Defense, at least off the top of my head, I don't think has worked on any major Israel based movie. So again, these kind of regressive or false or sort of twisted narratives in certain films are not directly the result of what the American government is saying. Certain examples I thought were going back to 1960. There was a film called Exodus, which kind of provided the sort of myth for how Israel was formed, and provided. Sorry, my phone's just gone beep. Go away. This is because I've been rushed today to try and get to this. I had to get a taxi from town. I usually walk, but I thought, oh no. So there has been very pro-Israel products made since that point. That was Paul Newman, I think, in 1960 Exodus. And was about the formation of Israel itself. But then more recently, there have been films like there's the comedy. I don't know if you saw You Don't Mess with the Zohan. Did you ever see that one?
Yeah.
That was not a again, not supported by Israel directly, not supported by the Department of Defense, but was an Adam Sandler comedy that kind of presents the Palestinian terrorist as this kind of hilarious, over the top villain who's kind of got parity with the Zohan, with the Israeli sort of hero. So it kind of comes across a little bit like He-Man versus Skeletor, kind of like. I mean, it's funny to some extent. It's funny, although I did notice that there's one scene in it where the Adam Sandler character throws a Palestinian off a roof. And it's all kind of like jolly and very comic book. And then you just catch a glimpse of it. It's only in a handful of frames, but he sort of looks down on him from the balcony as he's thrown this Palestinian off the roof, sort of scowls at him. And I was just like, for a second, I was like, yeah, this isn't a comedy. This is just a really horrible set of violent ideas. So there's another example that obviously was left out of Theatres of War, our documentary, because it didn't have that kind of involvement. And then, of course, perhaps most famously was the 2005 film Munich by Steven Spielberg, again, which is a really good piece of work, but and was received in the press at the time and by reviewers as being an even-handed cry of peace. And that's the sort of consensus was, Steven Spielberg's kind of bent over backwards a little bit here to be too friendly to the Palestinians. It attracted a boycott, I think, from one of the Israeli organizations, I think, at the time. But actually, we looked through it in a bit more detail, and there was like a 2-minute scene or 2.5-minute scene which sort of gave the Palestinian perspective, and the rest of it was just like, well, should we go around assassinating these guys that did the 1972 Olympic? Even if we might have got the identity of the terrorist wrong. So it's a good film, but that was again sort of part of promoting that kind of myth. Interestingly, and it was hardly noted, again, Steven Spielberg presenting himself as being very neutral, but a year after that film, he gave $1 million to Israeli organizations. Sorry, $1 million. $1 million. I don't think he gave anything specifically to military organizations, but nonetheless, I think it was an indication of how rooted he was in the Israel founding myth and in the early idea of Israel having to deploy considerable, overwhelming violence and to gain escalation dominance over its foes in the region, which may have been true. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be the greatest Israel scholar about its early days, but nonetheless, it's pretty clear over the past few years and eye-wateringly apparent over the past 10 months that what Israel is doing is so beyond the pale that anyway, it's just the fact is that Hollywood is not supportive of is supportive of those kind of that state terrorism, basically. And of course there are other examples as well. Sacha Baron Cohen is a really interesting character. Alan MacLeod, brilliant independent journalist, has talked about this, and I've sort of summarized Alan's work on Quora about it. Sacha Baron Cohen, again, a brilliant comedian, absolutely fantastic, and not someone who I'd sort of lump in a kind of Islamophobic box, perhaps, but he's been in several dramas and comedies and films which have taken pretty hard line, sort of Israel state line about the Israel relation with Syria, for example, as well as other things that he's done that have been pretty. I don't know. I always like to cut comedians a bit of slack, but he did a film that was very sort of derisory about working class culture in the north of England, and so anyway, the point is that there's a lot of congruence between a lot of the leading entertainers, whether they're stars or directors or whatever, and promoting Israeli narratives. It's not an area that I've written about in huge detail. There is a book called Israel and Hollywood. I can't remember the author, I'm afraid. I've got it upstairs. That goes into the history of it. Jonathan Cook sometimes talks about it, who is a guard, someone who I work with. I do voiceover work for Jonathan Cook's stuff on Substack, which I recommend if anyone's interested in Gaza. He's the clearest writer on that. Jonathan Cook worked for The Guardian for several years as their Israel correspondent, but then they parted.
Yeah, he
was like, I don't like.
I was just going to mention that. That.
Have you come across his stuff before? He's great.
Yes.
So I think I was on a TV show a couple of years, a news show on RT, I think it was, about this issue, where some of the other contributors, I think it was, I can't remember the name of it, but it was looking at the role of Israel, for example, in the creation of Wonder Woman, and trying to remember other ones. I think Wonder Woman was I think the lead star in that is an Israeli, and I think that there was other forms of support there. I think that Netanyahu went to dinner with one of the major studio executives from the company that made Wonder Woman. So there are those kind of links going on. So I think in this particular case, I feel like I don't quite have the qualification, if you like, to the research. I don't have the. I don't think anyone's quite got the research actually to determine exactly how Israel has impacted entertainment wholesale. I've just not seen that book written yet, and someone should do it. Someone suggested I do it the other day, but I don't want to.
We'd love to. I'll throw this out there. Me, Ryan, we would love to help you on that. If that's something we could do. I have
was
identified through Sonic's the Hedgehog,
Yes, I noticed you talking
and
about that.
Knuckles, the IDF being heavily talked about. But there's one particular movie, I don't know, maybe Tom Secker, this might be a question to ask him, as there is a specific name for Tom Secker in regards to when requesting what they call him when you guys send off these requests, which I think is pretty cool. There's a movie by the name of Sausage Party. I don't know if you are familiar with that. It's Seth Rogen's adult animation. So I'm going to play a video for us. And it's literally, it is a bagel and falafel. Yeah. Fighting. It's hilarious.
Don't touch me. You cock-sucking bagel fuckface! Watch it! You pushed me out of the cart! No surprise there, huh? A bagel trying to kill a Lavage once again?
I pushed you? What are you, nuts? Why would I do that? I'm a pacifist. The only thing I've ever pushed is my peaceful agenda, which even that I didn't push. You know, I pretty much passive-aggressively nudge. I reached out in a panic. It was Toots over here, the bun. She grabbed me.
Hey, I was just trying to save Frank.
Who is Frank? You!
Yeah, I'm Frank.
The fault is yours then, huh?
I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for any of this to happen.
Well, it did. And now you and your stupid, useless bun have fucked us all.
Hey, who you calling useless, you flappy fuck?
Sausage, control your insolent bun and cover her up already. Show some modesty, woman.
Oh!
Hey, look, we all just, calm down a notch, please. Let's try to be, I don't know, amicable. I'm Sammy Bagel Jr. I'm happy to meet all of you, except for this mashugana cunt over here.
Hi, I'm Brenda. Brenda Bunsen.
Oh, wow. Really? Well, fuck all of you. I am Karim Abdul Lavash. And what I currently care about is that I have been completely and utterly fucked out of being in the great beyond. I am to have 77 bottles of extra virgin olive oil waiting for me, destined to soak up their sweet juices as they dribble down my flaps.
Okay. Look, guys, here's what I'm thinking. We hurry back to our aisles, maybe we sneak into another package and still be fresh enough to get chosen.
So in that movie, they do one of two things. They fall into the trap of Islamophobia. They fall into this trap of painting Israel to be this passive. We're kind. But 76 years of oppression kind of says the other. It says the complete opposite. You obviously, probably never seen that movie before.
No, I hadn't. Who did you say, mate? Did you say
Seth Rogen? Seth Rogen, who has spoken out openly.
Frank.
Yeah, he was the Frank. He played the Frank in that scene as well. He's spoken out openly against Israel in some regard, quietly, but has kind of fell for some anti-Semitic talking points in the midst of that as well. So I was just curious if you or Tom, were aware of that movie and how throughout, and that's just one scene. There's multiple scenes of them arguing that in that manner, and then bringing up in subliminally the Israel-Palestine situation, where in that regard. So I just thought that one might be something that I'd share with you if you didn't already know about it.
That is really interesting to see that, and I hadn't seen that. And it reminded me the characterization there. It's exactly like You Don't Mess with the Zohan, which was a big Hollywood movie at the time in 2009. It's just the same thing. It's the same stock characters, but of course, then there's the deeper thing, isn't there? Which is what is called more often these days called Islamophobia. I don't know, quite slightly prefer the term Orientalism because it's just a bit more traditional, that's what Edward Said was talking about in the 70s, turning the idea of, we understand what the Orient is like. We understand it's this violent, exotic place. And Said said, well, all of you academics who are putting that out there, you're full of nonsense. I'm going to call this or I'm going to call what your discourse, your I can't think of a better word than bullshit, so I'm gonna have to say bullshit. Your bullshit.
Please don't refrain from using other words.
It should be called Orientalism. It's Orientalist deceptive framing of these people, and that goes back to goes back hundreds of years. The idea of the desert, the kind of the Islamic man who wants to repress the women and sell the women, and the kind of wizard with a cauldron in a giant castle and all those kind of things. And if you're not aware of his work, Jack Shaheen, who did Real Bad Arabs, is absolutely fantastic. And that kind of gets again to the, it's not just one office, and it's not even just 5 offices. There is a deeper rooted problem of racism, imperialism, domination going on in the media. And in Hollywood that goes back a long time. So for viewers who aren't aware, Jack Shaheen, who died, I think 2017. I met him once. He's a really sweet old guy. I think he has got roots in Lebanon. I think he was American, but I think he had roots in Lebanon. And he devoted his life really as an academic to analyzing over 1,100 movies and picking up where there were stereotypes, cliches, about Arabs and Muslims. And he went back all the way to early films from about 1910, like The Sheikh. He went through the James Bond movies. He went through everything, and The Mummy and all these things, and identified what he called the Alibaba toolkit. He was quite funny. He was quite a sweet guy. He wasn't, he was a very gentle man, was Jack Shaheen, but that's what he devoted his life to, and he was the one who ended up making I'll go back to the Alibaba toolkit in a second, but he was the one who ended up, because he was so good at that, he ended up advising on a few big movies. So Syriana, for example, George Clooney movie from 2005. Actually, a bit of a snore fest, to be honest with you. But Jack Shaheen's efforts on that were nonetheless good. And he also advised on that movie I mentioned earlier, which was Three Kings. If you look at the original script for Three Kings, it is regressive, anti-Iraqi junk. And Shaheen, even though he didn't completely fix it, if you like, his advice was taken on board by Clooney and David O. Russell. And that's how that you were able to get such an interesting perspective on that was sympathetic to the Iraqis. But Shaheen talked about the Alibaba toolkit, and he said everything begins in the desert. All these movies, all these books, all these TV series, all these plays, musicals, everything beginning in the desert, so that you've got this sort of this magical land where anything can happen. If you go to the Disney movie Aladdin, from 1991, I think it was 92. It begins, we come from a land from a far away place, where the caravan camels run, where we'll cut off your ear if we don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. Now that's an example. Department of Defense, nowhere near that. It's a Disney cartoon, but it began. It begins in that film begins in the desert, and it shows these old cliches of the Jafar, the sort of wizardy character, the kidnapped princess. I think perhaps wasn't a white princess in that, but nonetheless, those same kind of themes, the exotic themes, the ability to weave magic, black magic, the flying carpets, and all those kind of things. These are old-fashioned cliches that still permeate to the present day, including in that clip that you just showed me there. Sort of similar things going on. They have been a little bit more cautious about Islamophobic material since 9/11. And again, I can't remember if it was in National Security Cinema or in my first book with Pluto Press, which was called Real Power. But the Bush administration didn't want to have violence on the streets in the wake of 9/11, or at least not violence that it wasn't controlling. So they asked Hollywood studio execs to not push Islamophobic, not be racist, not push Islamophobic buttons. So that's why, for instance, on that second series, I think it was of 24, you've got Kiefer Sutherland having to begin. I don't suppose it's on the DVDs, but when it was broadcast at the time, Kiefer Sutherland comes on at the beginning of the show to say, "We torture a lot of people in this movie," but just to say you shouldn't do that in real life. These are all our Arab and Muslim brothers and sisters. But that's kind of, they had to do that because they were pushed by the American government. So there arguably has been a bit of an improvement. And Jack Shaheen, in his follow-up book, which was called Guilty, from 2008, he argued that there had been a small improvement because there was slightly more cultural awareness, and the government didn't want there to be a race war, or what you might call a religious war, on the streets of the United States, or to have pressure for a civilizational war. Probably partly because the American government wanted to protect its relationship with Saudi Arabia and a load of the other dictatorships down there. So, but the point is that these anti-Islamic tropes have been present for a long time, and his work was the best on that. If anyone wants to watch that, I think Real Bad Arabs is available as a documentary, I think for free, online still. Certainly there'll be clips of it. But yeah.
Okay. You don't have to leave. We just would like to take an interlude. So if you would like to stay for the second hour, we have more questions to ask. We have a George Carlin interlude that's going to play.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so if you'd like, you can go and use the restroom. You can go and fill your coffee, as I drank a whole cup of iced coffee through that. It was less than 15 minutes, but it was much needed. We will be back, you guys, to our guest. Again, this has been such a great conversation. The next set of questions, I think, for us will be directly from your book in regards to Avengers, as before we locked you in for today's conversation. We were going to do phase 1 and a decolonial breakdown using your book. So it's only fitting that we continue to do that with the author of the book that we were getting ready to reference. So we will be right back for the viewers and to the guests. Until then, enjoy some George Carlin, which you should, if you're not aware, one of the world's most funniest men to walk the face of the earth. So that's no pun intended, and I take every bit of smoke with that too. So
well, where do people think these politicians come from? They don't fall out of the sky. They don't pass through a membrane from another reality. They come from American parents and American families, American homes, American schools, American churches, American businesses, and American universities, and they're elected by American citizens. This is the best we can do, folks. This is what we have to offer. It's what our system produces. Garbage in, garbage out. If you have selfish, ignorant citizens, you're going to get selfish, ignorant leaders. And term limits ain't going to do you any good. You're just going to wind up with a brand new bunch of selfish, ignorant Americans. So maybe it's not the politicians who suck. Maybe something else sucks around here. Like the public. Yeah, the public sucks. There's a nice campaign slogan for somebody. The public sucks. Fuck hope. Fuck hope. Because if it's really just the fault of these politicians, then where are all the other bright people of conscience? Where are all the bright, honest, intelligent Americans ready to step in and save the nation and lead the way? We don't have people like that in this country. Everybody's at the mall, scratching his ass, picking his nose, taking his credit card out of his fanny pack and buying a pair of sneakers with lights in them. So I have solved this little political dilemma for myself in a very simple way. On election day, I stay home. I don't vote. Fuck them. Fuck them. I don't vote. Two reasons I don't vote. First of all, it's meaningless. This country was bought and sold and paid for a long time ago. The shit they shuffle around every 4 years doesn't mean a fucking thing. And secondly, I don't vote because I believe if you vote, you have no right to complain. People like to twist that around. I know. They say, well, if you don't vote, you have no right to complain. But where's the logic in that? If you vote and you elect dishonest, incompetent people, and they get into office and screw everything up, well, you are responsible for what they have done. You caused the problem. You voted them in. You have no right to complain. I, on the other hand, who did not vote, who, in fact, did not even leave the house on election day, am in no way responsible for what these people have done and have every right to complain as loud as I want about the mess you created that I had nothing to do with. So I know that a little later on this year, you're going to have another one of those really swell presidential elections that you like so much. You'll enjoy yourselves. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm sure as soon as the election is over, your country will improve immediately. As for me, I'll be home on that day doing essentially the same thing as you. The only difference is, when I get finished masturbating, I'm going to have a little something to show for it, folks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. See you later. See you later.
All right, we are back, you guys. Matthew will be back with us shortly as he is getting some coffee. Ryan, this has been a really good conversation.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I did have to message you.
Yeah, no.
It more particularly was the mic, and I know what it is. And so after we get off live, I'll help you with that on the levels, the settings. You have to go through your settings, but nonetheless, nobody did anything wrong. We're rocking today, man. This has been such a good morning. We got Festo in the comments.
Our Jamie.
Yeah, our Jamie. I want to welcome everybody who has joined, who has stayed, the concurrent viewers. Again, StreamYard likes to tell us what they want to and not the accurate count. So I know that there's more than 5 people that are watching. There's people that are watching on Instagram. There's people that are watching on Kick. Thank you to everybody that is watching. We just can't see the number count within our studio. We told you guys
we do appreciate.
Yeah. We told you guys that we're going to be doing phase 1. We've been saying that for quite some time. And so we were going to do that through the lens of National Security Cinema, written by none other than the individual that we have on today, Matthew Alford, and Tom Seckert, which we will be having on pretty soon, as soon as I can get the contact info for Tom. How do you would you go ahead? Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was just gonna say, with regards to Carlin earlier, let's
argue a conversation about Carlin.
I would argue if that's the way that him and I are pretty aligned on it. Only I would take it a step further and feel like you should be actively non-voting. Like, as far as, instead of staying home, you should go to your voting place and perform a sit-in, or do some kind of an event, a collective event, to let them know that we're done, we're good. This is nothing's getting better, and nothing's. I think Mr. Alford has a take on this as well that may be a little bit different, but
yes, which we can pull up, and we will be asking Matthew about this as well.
But yeah, I'm a firm believer in what Carlin said there, and I feel like it's time for us to move past electoral politics. And so that's why I wanted to show that clip today, because he was on it 20 something years ago, 30 years ago. He was telling little baby me that. So, that's what I grew up. I grew up on.
Yeah. So we have Matthew Alford back. But we also have Matthew Alford again via his YouTube channel. We're going to be playing a video. So before we get into Avengers and Marvel and their connections to the DoD, we did want to have a conversation around voting, because you did say something at least to me and Ryan, it makes complete sense in some aspects, but most importantly, we agree with you. That's really the the reasoning
Helpful.
behind it all. And so we're gonna play this this video and then ask you your questions regarding the current situation, voting situation within America with 3Ks.
Election of the century, a shifting chessboard with profound consequences for a polarized post-truth dystopia. As the US is set to repeat Trump v. Biden, democracy hangs in the balance like never before. Every 4 years, there's this massive game show to decide who's the worst person in America. Here, the British media thinks that electoral support for Trump is inherently awful. The latest political shows that I caught hold that he'll be worse in his second term because previously he had some sensible people holding him back. Really? People like John Bomb-Iran Bolton or Mike Bomb-Iran Pence or Mike Bomb-Iran Pompeo? Seems to me like Trump was always a moderate in his own cabinet. I hope Trump goes on to beat Biden in November after he defeats Nikki Bomb-Iran Haley. Then I hope he mostly does sit on the sidelines, fires every neoconservative.
You're on mute, Isaac.
My bad. It stopped playing early. My bad about that. But we'd like to get your current thoughts on the situation that is now what was Trump versus Biden. It's now Trump versus Harris, and I'm not voting for either one of these warmongering, genocidal cult leaders. You know, I'm not even voting third party. I don't really feel that they even have a rap tight. As a decolonial, communist myself, I have different approaches to how I go about using, the voting process and whatnot. But I'd like to get your thoughts, at least on this new situation that is Trump versus Harris. Harris now using her the leverage that she has for being from the diaspora, the African diaspora, to then leverage people, kind of like I think we're seeing a modern version of what was going on with Obama, where we're having individuals just blindly say, I'm going to vote for someone because this is a woman and she's a woman of color, and not really looking at the track record. And this even goes for Trump as well. Not looking at their track record. I'm just going to vote for him because they align with my ethno-Christian, fascist values. I'm seeing both sides of this duopoly. And I don't really see any of these individuals enacting any change, because that's not what their job is to do. Their job is to uphold the values and the pillars that are for Western imperialism, global imperialism, white hegemony, to be exact, if we were to, go down to its earliest roots. So I'd like to just get your thoughts on the current situation, how you as an individual who's seen it from the outside, looking in, how this affects even the labor parties that you're connected to. If I'm not mistaken, you're still connected to the party that George Galloway is connected to, which on the back burner, I'm going to see if maybe you can plug me in with the guy. I'd love to have a conversation with him regarding this said topic. But if you could just kind of your thoughts on this current situation. I know that video was a couple months ago, and I will say I you got 5 hours out of me yesterday watching your content. So
wow.
It's something that I really, now that I see that it's there on YouTube, at least, it's not as censored as I couldn't really find you on YouTube. Now that I've found you, I really do enjoy your videos. And so I do hope some new ones are going to be coming about pretty soon. But yeah, just your current thoughts on the situation. And how in the context of Gaza, in the context of just everything currently right now, the last 10 months, how are you feeling about these two candidates?
There's a lot to discuss there. And I feel I should initially say that this is although this is a global problem, it's primarily your problem because you're the ones who are voting there.
So Carlin literally talked about that in that video.
So when I made that video and did that article, I was reacting. I was being slightly cheeky and comical because I do think it's important to vote responsibly, however that is. But I was getting quite frustrated because a lot of people in Britain and in the rest of the world, Europe, will talk about the United States as if we are that, and so we worry in this country about the internal politics of the United States, about the economy. When maybe the economy is not such a good example, but who's going to be better for the United States internally, domestically, Biden or Harris or Trump or whatever. And my point of that article was to say, we're British. I don't care about that, really. My priority is the rest of the world, particularly when the rest of the world is a tinderbox that the United States is firing matches at. So I feel I know I was being a little bit unfair to your people there, but hopefully with a kind of, obviously I do want what is best for the United States and for its people. But my point is that we live on this is a global situation that's going on. And so I think that when we talk about it as British people outside the United States, we shouldn't just play into this thing of like, oh, well, what's best for the American domestic thing? Who's going to be the slightly nicer candidate when it comes to cultural issues in the United States? No, we should be people who recognize the instability of the international system and the American government's role in that. We should be committed to stopping that from being an issue over and above identity politics, whether on whatever color of anyone is, in the way that you put it, over and above identity politics, over and above those kind of sort of cultural issues, culture war issues, and to prioritize what creates a safer world. That's why when I went to Parliament, I didn't go to Parliament. That would have implied that I won. I definitely didn't win.
I was about to say congratulations to you.
Yeah. Wow. We're breaking news.
Maybe if we should say it enough on the
there you go.
Exactly.
True. Does it work like that?
Speak it into existence more. It'll
there was no chance of me winning in my little sort of liberal town, liberal city, I should say. Because there just wasn't the constituency for it here. But my point was that it was important to inject foreign policy debate into a more localized election. Particularly given that the Prime Minister of our country, who's just been deposed a few weeks ago, was saying the next 5 years in Britain will be amongst the most dangerous that we have ever faced as a nation. Now, that's a pretty sobering thing for a prime minister to say. And of course, this is in line with what a load of military officials and international relations scholars, et cetera, have been saying. So my point of entering the election was to say, foreign policy is domestic policy now. We need to think globally. I hope that's kind of obvious. I used this hat, which when I was campaigning, which was the British flag, the Union Jack, but it contains all of the countries that Britain has screwed over in my lifetime. So I'll put them at the base of the hat. So there's and we've screwed them over in various ways, whether it's Saudi Arabia just by allying with them and screwing over the people by having one of the most horrible dictatorships ever, Syria through billions of dollars of aid, Ukraine through selling them out effectively, Yemen through that long bombing campaign from 2015 to 2022. And of course, Iran and Iraq and others. I couldn't get the badges for everyone. But my point is that I agree with you. I think it's a very bad idea to just vote with your traditional voting bloc, or to vote with your skin color, or to vote with and that's where I'm being a bit more controversial. I'm saying don't vote with domestic issues, because particularly at the moment, that's not very important. This isn't 1975. Yeah, if it was 1975, then vote with domestic issues. There was not very much going on in international politics, and there was a hell of a lot going on with domestic politics because of the role of the CIA was actually coming out at that point, the assassination programs. But we're not in that point at the moment. We've got an extremely unstable world, which could very easily, in 3 different locations around the planet, Taiwan, Ukraine, and the Middle East, could spiral into a 3rd world war, and at the very least, a regional war. So you don't want irresponsible people to be handling that. As for whether Trump or Harris is better for that, it's very difficult to know. I mean, if I had to make a choice, I guess I'd say Trump. But I'd probably, if I was in the United States, I'd probably do what I did here, which is, I campaigned for George Galloway here, who is a kind of, he's a bit conservative in his own ways, depending how you want to define it. But he's really a traditional socialist. But I would probably campaign for Jill Stein, who's the Green candidate in the United States, and that's who Galloway himself said that he would support. So I'd be very much with
she's the closest.
Those kind of people. The closest, yeah. And I mean, obviously, not really any chance of that of her winning, but I think that's probably what I'd do as a person.
Right.
Whether I don't know what I'd quite do with Trump and Harris. I mean, I think it's again a decision that's that fine is very difficult to know, and you guys are in a better position really to make that choice. My guess would be that Trump would probably be a bit safer because he seems to be a bit more interested in managing the empire's decline, which is inevitable and has to be done. But I don't feel very clean saying that.
You mentioned something at the end of the video that didn't get played, which was like, let's bring on like the dictatorship, like, and so that's and that's something that's very serious, like that me and Ryan think that as much as like that was it was comical, or like how you said, a little clownish, like you got cheeky, it meant something really to me and Ryan, because it's like, yes, I'm there, this duopoly of global imperialism wants nothing more than mass escalation. That's its embodiment. Mass escalation, which then in part brings that same consumption that us as the viewers, us as the hosts, embody. It brings on the exploitation. It brings on the extraction of resources, which then in part keeps imperialism afloat, which then at the same time makes sure that labor parties and unions and whatnot are then regulated and everything. So in the compass of it all, it's complete. I would rather bring this mass escalation on. I'm not saying, hey, vote for Trump. I'm not saying that, because I'm just saying I would rather, if we're going to pick somebody, pick the person that for me is the worst, so that we can just get it over with already and start working on these realistic goalposts that we can reach, as a united front. There's an individual by the name of Daruba bin Wahad, who's a part of the Panther 21, the BLA, Black Liberation Army, and won a case against America, his asking for this united front, and Jill Stein has talked to him about this and everything, and his, I'm not advocating for Jill Stein, but what I'm trying to get at is that I would rather us advocate and leverage our energy towards, instead of bickering over who's the lesser of two evils when they're evil, we allocate our time towards, okay, let's create a united front, the ones that understand what's currently going on, the current construct at B, which is imperialism, and we need to dismantle that in order for us to have scientific socialist values to be implemented, for land back to be implemented. These types of narratives, quotes, terminology. We're not.
Yeah, can I just pick up on? I think I'll answer Ryan's point. I think you wanted to come in as well, Ryan. But to be clear, first of all, everything needs to be beyond just electoral politics. I mean, we're conditioned as people in all of these, in our civilization, in Western civilization, to think that that's what participatory democracy is going along and pulling a lever or ticking or whatever it is every 4 or 5 years. But that can't be it. And that's why I was saying right at the beginning of this, to say people, it is important just to turn up to protest and to not see it as like a big thing. It's not like, oh my God, I'm making a huge statement or I'm going to have a huge effect or no effect. Or just hang out in the right places and support. Basically, so try and give.
I would argue connections, right? Like connections, right? Like make connections to try to find.
It doesn't need to be a big effort. It doesn't need to be like, I'm going to form a band and it's going to be an anti-war band and we're going to save the world. It doesn't need to be that. It just needs to be just add your voice whenever you can to whatever fits in your life. So I would say that's an important aspect. I think there was another point I was trying to make there, but yeah, participatory democracy needs to be something more. And yeah, I forgot what the other point is I was going to make.
Well, I would argue that the thing that I want.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say. I was going to for the benefit of your viewers, I was going to say that was the sort of the point that I was making of that article. I framed that article as, would you prefer? I put it in binary terms. Would you prefer to have A, an American dictatorship, or B, a third world war? And whatever your answer to that is, says a hell of a lot about your politics. But it says even more if you're outside of the United States. But I think it says a lot about your politics because, would you prefer to live under a dictatorship or an autocracy or an international conflict? Now, I think that because people don't really understand how bad a third world war would be, I think a lot of people, particularly the Democrat types and those who are kind of Democrat adjacent, if you like,
yes,
are inclined to say, oh, well, the worst thing in the world would be to have a Trump dictatorship. That's probably not going to happen anyway, to be fair. But even if it was to happen, actually, it would be child's play in comparison to the nicest government in the world, with a third world war going on. Because any government at that point is going to be presiding over the corpses of. Anyway, I'm not want to bring the mood down any further. But basically, a third world war, people don't understand how bad that situation would be. And even if somehow they avoided using nuclear weapons, the economic dislocation would basically wreck all of our countries. And let's even look at the most sort of positive or a positive scenario briefly. Iran and Hezbollah have not retaliated for those major escalations by Israel at the end of July.
Yeah.
But at some point they probably will. But I think what could happen is that they're going to, there was a prediction, I think it was the leading Israeli general the other day said, if we carry on like this for another year, we're going to destroy our own country. We just cannot do it. And Haaretz newspaper said, will Israel celebrate its next major anniversary? And they said only if Netanyahu resigns, else we're going to just our whole. So, and I think this is bigger than Israel. I think that the Western Empire has been declining for quite some time, and we've hit that. We're beyond that point. At some point, and this is an optimistic way of looking at it, maybe your Russias and your Chinas might exert influence so as to prevent the United States and Israel and others from continuing to escalate militarily. But it's quite difficult to see how that can happen. Anyway, without getting into the weeds of that, the point of the article was to establish how awful a third world war would be and how basically fairly unlikely an American dictatorship would be. But nonetheless, we should be focusing on international issues rather than purely on American domestic issues.
Yeah, and I completely agree because global imperialism affects affects us all. And this is the makings of the embodiment that was sad to say it was European domination that then just kind of it became the America, the redheaded stepchild, who abruptly becomes the big bad and rules everything and has its hands in everybody's pockets, or everybody has its hands in in their pockets, so to say. Yeah, that's it. You know, I'm glad that at least we had that conversation in regards to the voting process, imperialism, because you're not just an individual who, you know, asks for 4A, you know, documents and whatnot, you know, and read, like, you actually are invested in getting, you know, people to understand politics, to understand what's currently going on in present time. So I really do appreciate you giving your analysis to that. Let's actually go into your book to go over what we were going to do if we weren't able to get you on today, which was just to go over phase 1 of Marvel. If you could just briefly break down before we go into specific movies in that phase. Phase 1 particularly is what they call in phase, you know, which is it ends, I believe, what the Avengers is. That's when phase 2, after Avengers, that's when phase 2 starts.
Yes.
So you talk about the Avengers, you talk about Hulk, you talk about Iron Man 2. What got you to want to make this somewhat of a chunk of the book? And in retrospect to that, you know, what are some things that were not necessarily left out but just didn't make that particular section?
The Marvel franchise has been very heavily dominated by the American military. The other agencies I don't think have been as involved, but again, the Department of Defense has been very influential. I should qualify, I think, my remarks just to say I'm looking back over the section that we did on Avengers now, and I think probably Tom did much of the Marvel stuff rather than me, so I don't remember it as clearly as I'd like to. Iron Man was we always suspected that Iron Man had been overhauled at script level from being a real out and out anti-war script to being essentially advocating for military intervention using American arms companies, as long as it's done by the good guys. We theorized that. I mean, I theorized that back in 2010 for my first book with Pluto Press, because the response to Iron Man by the press, by the reviewers and the press, was, you know, this is a real anti-war movie. You know, it's brilliant. But of course, it wasn't. It was quite deceptive in that regard. It was representing Tony Stark as this character who, you know, was using American machinery and ingenuity to fight the Afghans and other foes. But what we found out some information for National Security Cinema that gave substance to that theory, that it had been changed by the Department of Defense. But then, really, I should give full credit to Tom Secker and Tricia Jenkins, who then did Superheroes Movies and the State during lockdown. I think it came out in 2021, Superheroes Movies in the State. And they did a 10 or 11 page section detailing how that happened with Iron Man. And that's really interesting to see that sort of level of manipulation of that the Department of Defense exerted to create a series of new drafts to that script. So Iron Man's a really interesting one, I think, in that case. But yeah, a lot of them are heavily militarized. Avengers and Hulk was one that we were able to get all the documentation in time for National Security Cinema. I thought that was really interesting, and it shows the kind of petty nature often of the. I suspect that you guys. The thing is, I know that you guys know a lot about Marvel, so I'm going to stop talking in a second. But in case your viewers haven't come across it. They basically demilitarized loads of scenes in the Hulk because they didn't want to associate the US military with a mutant gone wrong sort of nuclear experiment. But they also there was a particularly notable change where they changed the operation to capture the Hulk from Operation Ranch Hand to Operation Angry Man. Now, I'm sure you guys must know this particular factoid.
I'm
You're
literally looking at it right now as you speak.
I will tell your viewers anyway, because I'm sure a lot of people won't know. But in the original script, they called it Operation. The operation to capture the Hulk was called Operation Ranch Hand. The Department of Defense was so picky and also observant that they said, don't call it Operation Ranch Hand, because that happens to be, just by happenstance, it was the name of a defoliant chemical weapons program that we dropped on Vietnam in the 1970s. So don't use that. Call it something else. They ended up calling it Operation Angry Man, I think it was.
Yes.
So, but I guess that's something we have. I can't remember if you got into it with Roger, but the finickiness, the pettiness of the changes is astonishing. I mean, there are very, very small changes that are made all the time. I say finicky. I mean, actually, if you're doing your job as a PR agency, you notice everything, and so they are doing the right thing by their own standards. But it's that kind of attention to detail and the impact that has on a script can be really quite profound at an ideological and political level, I think.
I think that's more to the point, right? Is that like those kind of changes, those little things are the things that keep people from like overwhelmingly understanding what's happening to them, right? Because if you're getting enough of these Operation Ranch Hands into your brain, and eventually you'll start to be like, wait, man, what is that? Wait a second, what's going on here? But then if it's just Operation Angry Man, it's completely different, because you happen to say you type in ranch hand right to the Google, and all of a sudden you're off on an adventure.
Exactly. So small changes can have huge ripple effects. In fact, here's another example, and something else that actually you asked the question about what else was omitted from from Theatres of War, the documentary. Computer games. There's a lot going on there. In fact, there's a piece going out on what's the name of the radio station in New York? I did a 15-minute piece. That little radio station that's really old, that all the celebrities go on to promote their movies. My brain's just gone just because we've been talking for too long. Sorry to the radio station. I didn't mean to forget the name of your show. But anyway, so I've done a new piece summarizing I had a brilliant research assistant working with me, but we did a new piece which is coming out next Wednesday, I think, on New York radio, and it's about the role of the Department of Defense in video games. But to jump off your point specifically, Ryan, you may remember that there's was it in Call of Duty? I'm trying to do this off the top of my head, but I think it was Call of Duty. They have the Highway of Death, which is it's one of the fictional scenes, the Highway of Death, where the Russians bomb retreating forces, I think, in one of the stands, and it's a big massacre. And they present this as being like this idea of a evil Russian government. The Highway of Death, if you had Googled that a week before that game came out, the Highway of Death was a phrase directly associated with what the Allies had done, or Britain and America. Sorry, specifically it was the Americans, in the first Gulf War, where they bombed the retreating Iraqi soldiers and technical people who were leaving Kuwait in 1991. They bombed retreating Iraqi forces in a war crime, killed several thousand, estimates perhaps 10,000. There were, and that was called the Highway of Death. Now, what have they done there, whether intentionally or not? But could well be intentional, couldn't it? They've created a computer game that basically means that whenever anyone types in Highway of Death, the association with a war crime in Iraq from the early 90s is now completely obliterated, taken over by a fictional game, and in fact then pinned on the Russians. So they've kind of wiped history there, or sanitized history, or pushed history to one side from extremely controversial American action. There was a famous photograph that was the front page of I think it was the New York Times, of a corpse that is retreating from Kuwait, and it's still grabbing the steering wheel, and the corpse has been basically turned to grey, like to ash. And it was a brilliant photograph. Can't remember who took it. And that became a quite sort of iconic image, if you like, of the Gulf War. You know, who remembers that now? Not since that computer game came out. And that kind of thing happens all the time. It's just ways of just erasing, eliding, sort of papering over controversial history.
Well, I can even compound on this in two ways, to give two examples. And I love that you bring up video games, because this is something that I've been speaking with Ryan. It's funny, like when you find certain people that are on the same wave tip of thinking and like analysis and research. I have been diving into finding videos that haven't been scrubbed by Activision for Call of Duty, Black Ops 1, 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare.
Yeah.
Because I specifically remember the maps that they had dates. They had dates and they had areas and names and places. It just so happens that I remember that Gaza, Yemen, these are all places right now actively in the time periods where 2024, 2025. And so it just correlates. And this is not to get in on a conspiratorial tip, but this is just pure. This is not a coincidence. I feel that this is mass manipulation, that they have indoctrinated children into believing that these games, you know, what's happening in these games needs to happen in real life, which is why we have mass fluctuates. It's a form of indoctrinating the youth to then in part work in reciprocity with the military, so that then these individuals who then play the video games Call of Duty want to do that in real life. You know, and so it's something that I've been diving into myself on my off time. So I'm kind of glad that, you know, at least I'll be able to pick your brain a little bit through that piece. Was it NPR by any chance that you?
No, it wasn't. I was just looking it up actually.
Yeah.
WBAI, Pacifica Radio, and the guy who was working with me on it was I've forgotten his surname, but Jack, and he works for Arts Express. He's the producer there, and he basically drove that research with me, but then I sort of put it together and voiced it. But I think that's coming out next Wednesday on WBAI 99.5 FM, New York City. So yeah, I hadn't ever seen, and I may have missed something along the way, but I hadn't ever really seen a tight package of material that summarized everything about Department of Defense influence over video games. I'd seen bits and pieces all over the place, and I'd seen sort of long books, but maybe a bit old, and it just felt like the right time to put across that that package and try and cover. I think we covered every game. There must be some that we missed, but you know, we were as thorough as we could have been. I have kept tabs on that over the years, but I'm glad that came together as something. So viewers might like that. If you're into, so because again, it's not just about movies, is it? It's about a whole range of things. And like you talked about with Roger last night, it's also about sporting events. You know, it's about all of these things. It's about even go back to what the CIA was doing in the 1950s. It's about influencing academic journals, Rampart's journal, and you know, influencing radio stations in Eastern Europe, and all these things. These are cultural manipulation. And it's not the. Sorry, I'm slightly ranting now, but it's not the same as just having.
Please do.
It's not the same as just having soft power. Countries have you know, cultural influence. It's worse than that, really, because it's actually very deliberate, deceptive influence culturally, which means that soft power can become so much more. You could almost call it acid power, couldn't you? Really, because it's soft, but it actually corrodes a hell of a lot.
If you don't, I would argue that that's kind of what's happened with our COVID response. Correct? You could argue that that they have used the media to just completely paper over our, you know, what we should be doing as far as like caring about and protecting ourselves from, you know, a deadly virus, just for example.
Yeah, but I'm sure you're right. Coronavirus was something that I always struggled to comment on, because I think for that whole period, I was so depressed.
Right.
I didn't read the news. I was just really low.
Right.
So I always struggle a little bit to talk about that one. But yeah, but I think there is the point that you go back to Chomsky's work about the media. You know, the point is that this is creating the media and all of these organizations, political organizations and institutions, they are creating a mainstream. And that within that mainstream, there can be furious debate, but they won't go outside of that mainstream. And that's where a lot of, I mean, just anecdotally, you know, a lot of, you know, people that I know and like, you know, fell out of that mainstream when it came to vaccines and things. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm not really taking an opinion on that, but the mainstream will be pretty ruthless with you if you don't fit within it. And that's why you need to have people who are pushing to the edges. That's why you need to have your George Galloways and your Jill Steins, and you need to lend support to those people and to your and to my film director guy Ken Loach, and you need that. That's why you need that, because the whole point is to try and create this. You know, the whole point of society of these.
Well, and that's why we need you, right? That's why we need you guys. That's why we need you and Tom and Roger in your work as well.
Well, I mean, it's got to be participatory. It has to be everyone, because there's not a great deal that you can do. I mean, even just just working with other people, you can't be isolated. I pretty much gave up after I did my doctorate and I did my first book around about 2012. I don't mean through any miserable reason. I just mean, I sort of, I've done that now, really. It was, and I probably wouldn't have done anything more. I was teaching more, and I had some other like hobbies and things like going on, so I didn't really need to do research. It was only because Tom was so enthusiastic that we were able to join forces and to actually, so that's where the majority of those documents came from. Was just working with other people and keeping an open mind to that kind of thing. I was prepared to sort of leave this sort of study behind, but I was really invigorated again by that. And then the creative project with Roger Stahl to create Theatres of War was very motivating. But by that point, really, both Tom and Roger had were very much leading on the research, whereas I wasn't. I'd started to develop other interests as a political commentator. I mean, I'm still really interested. I still think it's one of the most vital things, this manipulation of the media, and particularly of this underrated, under-recognized manipulation of entertainment is still one of the most important things in the world. But I've sort of broadened out my work and activities a fair bit over the last few years.
Yeah, and so I not that we don't want to get into the Avengers. I just had one particular question.
Yeah, I can barely remember the film. That's my struggling a little bit.
Maybe we can shift to a different body of work of yours. Something that for me, after watching yesterday, really shook me. I'm not gonna lie. And one thing too, I want to ask you: did it oddly surprise you that Wendy Oakes looked exactly like Ali Walker, who played an ATF agent on Sons of Anarchy? I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the whole entire time I was weirded out because I'm like, they keep calling her Wendy, and I'm like, that's Ali Walker. What's going on here? Like that's but just if you could in brief, I know you said there's a book that you have written about this said story. If you could briefly kind of explain that situation and the makings of that, and kind of where you're at now. I from my knowledge, or from what I got from that, is that it was a very stressful time period for you during the makings of that, after that. And so if you could just kind of like, where's your mindset at now after that? Because that was a very tough documentary for me to watch, because I seen essentially you break down. It was they were lifeless, if I were to use a term. And so if you could, I don't see that now. I see very, very peachy in the cheeks, very joyous, very if you could just walk us through that and where you're at now with that body of work.
Yeah, not quite sure what to say about that really, but you're referring to when I was I had 2 kids around about 22 children under 2, and I was living with my ex-wife, which continued for several more years after that. We'd broken up, but we had to live together, and so I was a little bit on edge. And I was also unemployed. This was before I actually got more teaching work, and so I threw myself into this conspiracy theory, this bizarre conspiracy theory, which was the disappearance of a fairly well-known Hollywood screenwriter called Gary DeVore, who had gone into who had basically had to have turned around on a major road and driven several kilometers against traffic if he was to have ended up in the position where his car was eventually discovered. So there are a lot of inconsistencies with the case. And then I investigated it, made a film about it, going to the United States, going to Los Angeles. And then the filmmaker himself was a bit of a peculiar character, which kind of led indirectly to that being sort of making the film quite good, I think. And then I wrote a book out of it. There were rumors of National Security Agency involvement in the disappearance of this screenwriter because he had been writing an anti-war script about the U.S. invasion of Panama from 1989. I've been, I mean, you've got me talking about it a bit now, but I didn't promote that at all in the wake of it, because it was a stressful period. And it was a stressful thing to get involved in. And I suppose what I would say to anyone who does get too heavily into conspiracy theories and the details of those kind of things, it can be quite an unrewarding, but also very addictive thing to do. So maybe I should leave it there. But,
I was going to say yes, because I'll just go out here and say it. I've always said this, and I'll go to my grave. Jean-Claude Bonnet is Katy Perry. No, I'm just playing with you.
I was going to say Wendy, the widow of Gary DeVore. I mean, you observed that, but actually, she, the pop star Cher. Yes. Wendy was the body double and impersonator for Cher in various movies and TV shows, and whenever she needed, her back or whatever it was, for throughout the 70s. So Wendy played that role, and Wendy was in things like Baywatch and all sorts of other movies and shows. And I'm still very close with Wendy, and she's still in Los Angeles. And there's even the possibility of Gary DeVore's some of his unused scripts being produced. In various news stories in the Hollywood press about that over the last few years, and there was a huge podcast that was made about Gary DeVore's disappearance just in December of last year, which was I did comment on briefly there. But yeah, I felt that I shouldn't be. I'm not trying to be too coy about it, but basically, I did. What I put down into the book of that, which discusses the filmmaking process, discusses the investigation, but also narrativizes it in terms of my own life and feelings. I felt that was all I really ever wanted to do or needed to do. It was a novel that was that represented, I think, very clearly the sort of transitions that I was going through as a human being through engaging with that bizarre piece of Americana.
Okay. No, yeah, and I thank you for briefly going through that. We have had you on for a little under 2 hours now. I really do want to thank you, and what I would like to ask you is 2 things. I'd like to invite you to be a guest on Black Power Media. I believe I mentioned that in the email. So I'd like to work out a date with you for next week, if possible, to go in specific on this book in particular. And the second question that I'd like to ask you is if you would like to be a part of a once a month we throw a movie at you that we will watch as well, that potentially you could review, and we can kind of do. There's a scholar, an academic, a historian, I should say, an activist, an attorney. He is a man of many names. He's written over 48, I think 49 books now. Dr. Gerald Horn from the University of Houston. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's actually written some books on Hollywood as well, the media role.
Sounds like I should. Yeah, sounds like I should look him up. That sounds great. Thank you.
He does this thing called Gerald Horn Around the Horn report. I'd love to do something similar with you, where we can get you on at least maybe once a month, twice a month, whatever fits your schedule, to where we can specifically go over. Even if we start with specific books that maybe you're into, or not books, specific movies that are referenced in your book, that we can go over. I'd love to open up that invitation.
Yeah, that sounds really good fun. That sounds great. I'll be interested in doing that. Thanks, Isaac. It sounds really good. I should comment as well that, because you asked about contacting Galloway, I don't actually have direct contact with him, but also it might be worth noting that he does a TV show. He's the only politician I know who does this.
The mother of all talk shows.
No, he does the mother of all talk shows, which is also a phone-in. But he also does Have It Out with Galloway, which is a smaller show where you can be a member of the audience and ask him a question. And so you can appear. So that might be the best if you want contact with him, or to engage with him in some particular way. That's the best way to do it. I've been on Mother of All talk shows a few weeks ago, the day before the election. But I've also been a regular on the audience show Have It Out with.
I was actually watching that yesterday, and he referenced yesterday, last night. And so that it was something that I didn't even realize. But yeah, I'm super. The main question I want to ask him is, and maybe it's something that's it's a little up there, but I want to know, the platforming of American fascists, so to say, MAGA communists, and the likes of like Jackson Hinkle. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Is very well known on Twitter or X. And so just asking him a question in regards to that, because like when we talk about liberation and we talk about socialist aesthetics, I'm a scientific socialist through Pan-African ideology, and I hold myself to to call myself a decolonial communist. So I go through the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Kwame Touré, Malcolm X, W.B. Du Bois, and so I have just like a different interpretation of like what socialism looks like, I feel, compared to like how the mother of all talk shows, and I like it. It's one of the shows that I love to listen to on my off time. And so I just had some particular questions, in regards to that. He had some individuals on there that I don't necessarily see eye to eye with, but say that we're on the same tip. We're on the same tip, and so I just needed to clear the air. And maybe I can do that on that lower ranking.
I think that sort of question sounds absolutely perfect for it. I'd go for it if I were you. I'd be really interested to see his answer.
I am too. I am very curious because I actually phoned in and his show ended right when I was getting ready to come on the show. So there's a little bit of a personal. No, there's nothing personal. I just it's a show that I love. I love to watch. I like to watch it more than Piers Morgan. I'll just throw that out there. And I'm kind of glad that Imani Khalif has kind of shut Piers Morgan up as of late. I had to research this, by the way. I had to figure out what was going on. He's a part of a lawsuit. In regards to Imani Khalif, the welterweight boxer from the Olympics that was labeled trans, and she wasn't trans at all. It was very, very messed up. And so when you connect the dots, and then also from my sources, the people who have told me, he was slapped a cease and desist, and also was a part of a lawsuit along with J.K. Rowling. So
interesting.
Win-win for Imani Khalif. We haven't had. It's been about a month of no Piers Morgan. It's crazy.
Is that why he's not been on?
He hasn't been
doing
on the
his
air.
show
I was going to ask you if if maybe they're just censoring him in America, and that's why we're not getting him.
No, I've not seen him for a while, and it reminds me as well that I saw Galloway literally just yesterday say that he was suing Elon Musk as well over some slander, which I have not looked into in any way yet. So that's another one that's I don't know. These kind of sort of bun fights can be really revealing, can't they? And but yeah, I'll look into that further.
Yeah, I think, and well, that, and I can obviously say that I think Piers Morgan has obviously labeled himself, without labeling himself, a shill for Israeli propaganda. And so, I really did enjoy when George Galloway and Roy Waters went on there and just completely obliterated him. It was like come on, like I'm not gonna sit here and pretend. But yeah, we've kept you for 2 hours now, Matthew. I want to say thank you for coming on.
Honestly, thank you so much.
It has been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, and hopefully we can get you, Tom, and the way that I'm going about this is I'd like to individually speak to you guys and then come together as one,
like the Avengers.
And we just completely obliterate all of these false narratives that media has no role in the manipulation, i.e. through the lens, like how you said, something that you're working on or you have been working on is Noam Chomsky's work. Manufactured consent plays a huge role in how these movies are played out, how these movies are scripted, re-scripted. And so I'm looking forward to getting you back on, getting Tom on, and us opening the floodgates, so to say, to making sure that not just this book is prevalent, but the documentary, all your guys' bodies of work, because they encompass what currently in current times we're experiencing, which is mass manipulation. I watched to keep it short, I watched this docu-series with Anne Hathaway and Jared Leto, where they play the WeWork founders. WeWork is an Israeli, they're Israeli, so they're Zionists. And throughout the whole entire movie, that's what they propagate. They propagate this Israeli propaganda that they're in Israel. They name Palestine Israel. That's a part of the erasure of Palestinians within media. So it's just like there's a lot of stuff that that I've seen over the past couple of months, and so I'd love to kind of dive into that with you guys, and kind of
sounds great. Yeah,
really do the narrative. So yeah, thank you, Matthew, for coming on. To the viewers, how can they find you? Is there a social media? I know the way I contacted you was through the University of Bath. That's how I was able to find you.
The best place to follow me is probably The Writer with No Hands on Facebook. That's a really good place. The Writer with No Hands on Facebook, or oh god, I think I'm just down as Dr. Matthew Alford on Substack. I'm putting out regular articles about international politics this year. Dr. Matthew Alford on Substack. The Writer with No Hands on Facebook. Those are the two. Well, and also YouTube, which I think again is Dr. Matthew Alford. So yeah, find me on those. I'm putting out regular stuff at the moment, particularly YouTube. Substack, every sort of 2 or 3 weeks I put out something on there that's a sort of major article. And Facebook, that's where I put everything. I usually post every day on Facebook something or other, which is relevant to war, conspiracy, and deception.
Okay. Well, there you go, guys. This has been such a amazing conversation. If I could get an extra hour out of you, I would, but I just wouldn't be fair. I want to again thank you for coming on, and you will be back. To the viewers, thank you for watching. This was Decolonial Parallels with Matthew Alford, as we went over national security cinema, Gaza, theaters of war, multitude of movies, conversation on Trump, Harris and Walls, the duopoly that needs to be dismantled. And so again, the next time you'll see me and Ryan will be through Breaking the Backboard, where we get into basketball sports media takes, which plays a large role in what we just talked about today. So yeah, we will see you guys in the next one.